I say that Bitcoin is a life raft escape from the control system, and people don't really understand necessarily what that means in the first instance. But, the more you hear about, this talk of CBDCs and the $10 trillion, strategic reallocation or whatever, they always come up with these, branded words kind of things to justify what they're trying to do. But when you start scratching the surface and you realize that it's just a segue into surveillance money, greater control over people's lives, and if people could only just understand what that actually means. And, if you start placing restrictions on people's ability to go about their life from a personal finance point of view, and you start really centralizing that to a different level. I mean, we still have access to cash, which, is a bearer instrument. You and I can trade, $10 or $100 bills and no one needs to know about it. And that's a right that right now we still have. But, if you kind of start to crystal ball all of this and you look at the red flags and what's going on, you can't help but think that we're heading down a road which is, it's going to put a lot of people in a position where, because they didn't see the signs and make adjustments and start, looking for a path that was decentralized instead of centralized, which is what Bitcoin is. That's the reality of where we're headed. And I don't pay attention every day to the mainstream news. I spend very little time on it. And so for me, it's very difficult to sort of comment on a lot of these things that are going on. I do have an ear to the ground and I am kind of broadly familiar with things that are going on. But for me, it's just reinforcement as to why people really need to be doing their homework on Bitcoin sooner rather than later. And, not putting it on the back burner, because a lot of people forget, that Bitcoin was a gift to the world at a very specific time, right? Bitcoin came out in October 2008. What happened in September 2008? We saw the fall of Lehman Brothers, and it was the cascading effect, the global financial crisis. And people have very, very short memories. We think of the COVID era, the global financial crisis, the ripple effect, all of the bailouts that the big end of town was able to tap into to save their asses. And yet who got left holding the bag? And so people will, I think, tolerate disruption to their life, inflation, a cost of living crisis, a growing wealth gap, not being able to buy a home. All of these things people will tolerate to a certain level, but I'm not quite sure what the breaking point's going to be. Maybe it's going to be they go to the bank one day and the ATM doesn't work, or, you try to call the bank because the ATM doesn't work and nobody picks up the phone, and we know these things have happened. I mean, I know you had Tony Yazbek on your show very recently. I mean, to me, Tony is one of the best guys in Bitcoin to listen to, because he's not there to just teach people about the number go up side of it. More importantly, he's there to teach people about the freedom and the sovereignty side of it. And unfortunately, what I find in the Bitcoin space, there's not enough time spent on that side of it. And so I spend a lot of time on that side of it. I don't really pay attention to the day-to-day price movements of Bitcoin. Because for me, I think we're going to head into a parallel economy situation anyway. It's just going to happen. And I know in the US, we're already seeing fast food chains like Steak and Shake and that are now all of a sudden accepting Bitcoin as a payment option. And I think we're going to see all of that happen at an accelerated rate over the next couple of years. And so, look, it's really it's difficult to know what the pivotal point's going to be where people start to really wake up and go, okay, we understand now. All you crazy Bitcoiners, you've been pounding the table for the last 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and we haven't been paying attention. but shit, we got to pay attention now, But the unfortunate thing about that is that, and I'm not a big fan of this saying, but there is a reality that people get Bitcoin at the price they deserve because, they put it on the back burner for a long, long time. I heard about Bitcoin in 2013. I didn't think I needed it. My business was going great. Things were going great. It didn't make any sense to me. And my ego stopped me from learning about it, So, man, I hope that kind of goes some way to answering your question, but there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah, that's such a phenomenal point, Zane. I mean, there's so many things we could unpack there that it makes me think of how do you teach? Because I think about this all the time. How do you teach people? Because I know my life, I'm 38 years old, and I know where I am now is where I've been called to be for my entire life. And now Bitcoin didn't exist for all that time, but everything I was doing was leading up to this time. And I always had this call and this pull to educate people really about truth. I don't know how else to say it other than that. And that's a call I can feel from you. I was just in Vegas, and we just had the big conference there, the big Bitcoin magazine conference. And a lot of people there, they have that same call and that same feeling, but how do you get people how do you teach them and educate them to see what we're seeing or to start understanding that or be active in it and take a liking to it or whatever it might be? Because like you said, people get it at the price they deserve because a lot of people just don't care, especially in the Western world where all of a sudden, I mean, it's almost hard to even say that though, because like you said, I mean, there's Tony Yazbek, what happened in Lebanon there. There's, CBDC talk all around the world, just this digital panopticon. There's lockdowns all over the world, Australia, the UK, the US. You've got, bank accounts being frozen, the Dutch farmers, the Canadian truckers. It goes on and on. These are not emerging markets by any means. I mean, these are G7, G20 countries. How, in all your years of learning and understanding, how do you strike that balance? Because I think that's what we're all wondering, whether we're people on podcasts or people conducting podcasts or Bitcoin education. How do we help people see that light and that truth, but not have to touch a stove, not have to have all those bad things happening that we've kind of been, thrown out there the last 20 minutes?
Yeah. I think the first reality is that with Bitcoin, you've got to take the red pill before you take the orange pill, which means you have to be willing to learn about money, and I think until you learn about money and what money really is, it's not this thing that we're going to work for every day, the Australian dollar, the US dollar, the Canadian dollar, whatever it might be. Yes, we've been raised to believe that that's money. And the past 50 years, it's all we've known, since 1971 when we came off the gold standard. But people don't even know that simple reality, Brandon, that in 1971 there was a crisis moment, and President Nixon made an announcement that we were going to temporarily suspend the convertibility into gold. Suspend the convertibility of gold into dollars because of the speculators. And of course, we know whenever a politician says that something's temporary, it basically means that it's permanent. So,
I was thinking that quote just now. Yeah.
So that reality in itself, I think if people would just understand that, and the reason why this is important is because everybody's life, if they really think about it for just 1 minute, it's centered around the almighty dollar. People are working harder than they ever have for less because their purchasing power is being decimated. And they don't realize that. They know that, shit's going down because they go to the grocery store and they can see that they can buy half the stuff they could buy 5 years ago for the same amount of money. And they can see that a house, that was, $400,000 5 years ago is now, 800 to $1 million. But their income hasn't doubled, and so people know inherently, intuitively that there's a problem, but because they haven't been sort of walked through what the problem is, they're just sort of on a path to destruction. I mean, I love the quote from Michael Saylor, people are working exponentially harder for a currency that is growing exponentially weaker. And that is the road to serfdom. And serfdom is essentially slavery. It's peasantry, right? And this is how you create a Hunger Games society where all of the wealth goes to the top 5%, the middle class fall to the bottom, and you've got a two-tiered society where, all of those people who are fortunate enough before all of this inflation went to a hyperinflationary accelerated level like it has in the last, 5 years since COVID, they're getting wealthier and wealthier and wealthier. And everybody else who's just working for an honest living, trying to raise their kids, trying to put food on the table, trying to pay their rent, trying to pay their mortgage. These poor people, they're just getting smashed and they're falling to the bottom. So they know what's happening inherently, like within them, but they just don't know what the cause is. And I think if people could understand what the cause is, it's not something that you've done. It's something that's outside of your control, but you have the power to take back control by learning about Bitcoin. And so we can, and I know we're going to head down this path, we're going to talk about why Bitcoin's the solution, but the reality is until people take that red pill, there's no way they're going to walk down the path of Bitcoin, because I say to people all the time, and I've met people, very successful people who high net worth, assets, real estate rich and all of these things. And they bought Bitcoin, the number go up and maybe they doubled, tripled their money, and these are smart people, right? They just had no idea about the asset that they hold because they just haven't done the work on Bitcoin, and they'll probably never get it back, and that's the greatest shame, that even smart people haven't done the work on Bitcoin yet, because, people are living their lives, they're running their businesses, they're doing what's always worked for them. Some people are really successful in that, and so they don't have that need to know. Again, another sailor quote. Bitcoin is a need to know basis, and that's why a lot of people who are highly successful don't embrace Bitcoin, because they don't have a need to know. They're successful in the fiat system. But the people I feel for most are those who are in the middle, whose lives and their financial futures are being taken away from them without them even realizing it. And they don't yet realize that Bitcoin is a solution, but I do believe that in time they will. And I'm not sure what that moment's going to be, but we're all doing our best to try and educate the world, aren't we? So, it's. I think there's a reality to life too. That if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? It's true for so many things. And I think it's true for Bitcoin as well. It's not an easy path to walk down, to do the work, to study, to develop your conviction, to take that first step to actually buy a bag of sats, or some Bitcoin. And then the next step, which is to actually take it into self-custody. And it just takes, that all takes learning and a willingness to go down this path. And, I'm on a mission just to help people simplify it, not be daunted by it, realize that you don't have to own one whole Bitcoin. This whole thing is fractionalized. You can get exposure to this asset. You don't have to give away the farm, but just take some form of action and just one step at a time, just further your knowledge, further your conviction, because this is the future.
If you like that clip, then you definitely got to check out this next spicy clip. I think you're really going to like it. Come on, check it out. But if you want the full version, the full interview, then check that out over here. Come on, do it. I'll see you in there.